everybody. Welcome to, I guess this is going to be an interesting intro, actually. So this is the first time we're doing this, and we're launching a new podcast called Hyphae Leaks Podcast with Mary Carrion and Reggie Harris. How are you both doing today?
So well.
What's good, man? I'm fucking fired up right now. I'm extremely fired up. Mary, how are you?
Yeah. I'm great. Just burning up here in LA. You know, the sun is shining ever so warmly, and I'm burning up in my house. But, you know, aside from that, great.
This is awesome.
We're on the East Coast right now in College Park, Maryland, kind of wrapping up the tail end of what's been a cross-country myco tour. Started in Denver, Chicago, Pennsylvania, and now that I got this negative COVID test, it looks like we're going to be going to Vermont and finishing in Minneapolis.
Snaps That's for negative COVID tests.
Yes, let's keep it safe out there, folks. Wash your hands, everybody. But yeah, all right. So let's dig in. Let's give a high level description of what y'all are trying to do with this new Hyphae Leaks podcast.
Mary,
So for me, my reasoning for wanting to do this podcast is because there's a lot of things that can't be discussed in the current landscape of psychedelics journalism and just psychedelic media in general. And honestly, just the media landscape in general. And that's mostly because of ads and needing to be discussing certain topics, basically having to discuss certain topics and having to conduct advertorials and put together, marketing packages and having to ultimately honor the ad space for, for businesses who are going to help fund your publication. And so therefore, no matter what, regardless of what area of journalism or media you are involved in, you are limited in what you can say. So there's a lot that's going on in psychedelics, the space, without any coverage really whatsoever. And, it's neither here nor there whether these topics can be talked about or not. And I'm not saying that any of the people or publications who are currently doing journalism or work in this space aren't covering things. They're doing excellent work, all of them. But this is what I want to do. I want to talk about the things that often can't be discussed due to advertising dollars. And that's one of my sweet spots in general. That has been one of my issues as a journalist for a very long time. And I'm really honored to be given this platform and given a space to discuss difficult topics that typically are not talked about on a larger scale, but are definitely talked about in the community.
Yeah, man.
I love that.
I'm going to ride on that. I mean, one of the reasons why I feel like we both work very well together is because that's both of our North Star. Hyphae Leaks is derived from, shout out to Edward Snowden, free Edward Snowden. Julian Assange, my fault. Shout out to Julian Assange. And
I'm cool if they both get out. But,
yeah, honestly. Yeah, right. I mean, they're both they're doing the same thing.
And I think that Julian Assange did the world a service by kind of peeking behind the veil and bringing the people behind the veil with him. I could only pray to be as impactful as Assange ever was. But it's the inspiration for the name and, quite frankly, for the way that I want to move in the psychedelic space. I think that we are blessed enough to have both a foot behind the curtain, but also a foot solidly planted within the community, and a shitload of credibility within the community. I think that it's my goal to have Hyphae Leaks kind of cover the blind spots that maybe the current landscape might have. Just the chemistry that you and I have, our backgrounds, cover a wide swath of plant medicine, but also, Mary, you're known for not dancing, and I'm known for not dancing. And, here we are with the marriage of the Hyphae Leaks podcast. So I think that you should expect everything that you think of when you think Reggie Harris, Oakland Hyphae, or Mary Carrion. We put out what I consider the most impactful think piece of the MAPS conference was a simple essay about the cost. But the difference between what we did and the difference of what a lot of people who were thinking about cost or thinking about critiquing is that we actually had access to reach out to maps, have maps on the record, giving comment, as opposed to just one side of the conversation. And I think that that's the upside of what we're trying to aim for.
And I think also, there are a lot of people. It's easy to be a bully, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, is that it's easy to be a bully. It's easy to attack. It's easy to be just an asshole for no reason or for reasons, all of the above. But there is also a fine art to delivering criticism that, while accurate, doesn't have to be totally written in a way or presented in a way that is horribly rude, tactless, etc. You can still deliver it with elegance, which I think we have done with Hyphae Leaks on a couple of different occasions. And so that's something that we're planning to continue to bring, even if it comes out a little funny, maybe. We might say funny things and maybe, make some people angry with the things that we say. But the truth is that it's not going to be inaccurate. It's not going to be low blows. It's not going to be stuff that's like, stuff that's going to cause extreme negative harm to people that aren't doing something wrong, So
it's deliver the message.
Preach.
So they said deliver the message with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also, it's always important, for at least for me, to represent the people. That is something that has been a passion of mine since I started journalism, since I started writing, since I got my first staff writing job at OC Weekly back in 2016. Representing the people and the thoughts of the people and what is currently the discourse moving around in different communities and groups, that has always been one of my sweet spots too. And so giving the people an opportunity to speak kind of through me or the critiques, that's also something that I'm trying to do. So I'm not coming here and just, giving my opinions about who I don't like or what I like, et cetera, et cetera. But, I'm also trying to give the people an opportunity to talk through me as well.
Joe, let me ask you a question. Why did you, what in your mind said, this is a concept I want to support? Like what took you from this being just something that was pitched to like, yeah, I want to run with it?
Well, I've liked, Reggie, what you've done, and getting stories told that are kind of taboo to tell, right? You've done a lot of that, and it's been awesome. And I've really loved your energy and your hype. So and also this power to the people kind of attitude, right? Like, we don't necessarily need pharma grade psychedelics to come from a pharmacist, right? Like, we can do really impactful shit in our closets.
Yeah.
And, meaning everybody out there growing, you can grow fucking mushrooms anywhere. You don't need to be a genius. You can, in fact, be pretty dull and grow great mushrooms. And, I think there's a lot of that. And that's not an attitude I see enough of in the space. Like, I'm kind of like a full tilt and the drug war radical, right? Like, I want to see regulated safe supply for everything that somebody could be wanting to use, because otherwise they don't know what they're actually using and they might die or go to prison, right? And I want to see everybody out of jail. I want to see everybody having access to what they want, and at an affordable way, right? Like, you're kind of there's a bit of a critique largely of the larger biotech play that comes from you, and I appreciate that. I still think we need it, but I don't think it should be the dominant play at all. I think we need a tapestry of plays. And Mary, with you, we I think had conversations for years now, 4 years maybe.
Yes.
And yeah, I forget how we even worked together. Maybe you wrote for us, or maybe you interviewed me for a piece or something. It was super fun. I remember working with you, and I liked the attitude and what you were up to, and your approach, because you're right. We don't need more bullies in the space. We have plenty of bullies in the space.
So many. So many.
that's not how I want to show up, right? I want to show up and make conversation possible, right? Like,
Absolutely.
imagine if your impact is so ridiculous that you've shut down conversations. Like, people are unwilling to have conversations because you're such an asshole.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. There's a way to still get your point across without being a total dick about it. You can get the exact same point across if you have the conversation skills to have dialogue with others, and you can still feel fiery. You can still spit your fire, but there's a way to do it. And yeah, it's an art. It's totally an art, but it's something that I've dedicated myself to at this point because yes, there are so many critiques to be made. But you don't have to come in like a bowling ball in a china shop and just knock everybody down, because what's the point then? No one's going to talk to you.
Also, yes, that. And it's for me, it's a balancing act, because the people
Absolutely.
who we've lined up for this pod, are some people are controversial. Some people have done controversial things in the space. The interview that I'm really excited about, and I think the PR people told me it's a go yesterday, was that a person who's not actually a psychedelic person but is moving around in the psychedelic space, Steve D'Angelo. He's the self described godfather of pot, and there's a lot of, for me, since I've been running these Oakland Psychedelic Conference now, this will be the third one. Every single one, we've had conversations about lessons learned from cannabis. So who better to learn from than the OGs who are actually in the field, the people who are actually dealing with the licenses, the people who are actually lobbying. But right now, Steve is so controversial that a lot of people want to cancel you just because you have a conversation with the man. But when I talk to the man, you don't rise to those levels and just be dumb and not have anything to offer. Regardless of personal quirks or whatever, like the skill set that takes you to get to a place and blaze such a trail, basically, there's shit to learn from. And B, if this person says, hey, if I had another, at bat, I would do it this way, I want to hear those stories. Like, regardless of people's personal feelings about the man, I want to hear what the man who basically helped usher in legal cannabis, and might have regrets about the way it was done, I want to hear those before we start ushering in legalization to our things, and we don't learn from those lessons. Because actually, the only framework that we had to base our decisions on is what's been done in the past. And so that's what I'm here for. It's like, all right, I want to put OGs up. I want to have the controversial guest. I want to have the controversial conversations. And I also want to make sure that a lot of my homies that, are grassroots level people that might get overlooked, like my man, I know, Joe, you have a very good relationship with my man, Aize, and his project Table of Our Own. But like, it's hard. Like, these guys, they spend $250,000 of their own money putting together a documentary that's a one of one, in my opinion. At Maps, they got a 5-minute fucking standing ovation for that. I want to bring him. I want to bring Kufi Kiri. I want to bring, the Table of Our Own people here to talk about not only why they felt the need to create a documentary about Black psychedelic professionals, but like what went into it. Because looking at the film, it looks great. I couldn't have guessed that they spent $250,000 of their own money on that shit. And so I want to have those sorts of conversations.
Right. And that's why we started, honestly. Well, one of the reasons. It's actually the fourth reason, and we don't talk about it a lot. So we really started Psychedelics Today to spread the word of Dr. Stanislav Grof's LSD psychotherapy, holotropic breathwork, and transpersonal psychology. But another problem we were addressing was we hear from the same people too much. And there's so many people in the space, and we need to hear from them. For instance, we took like 5 years before we had Rick Doblin on the show, right? Because everybody knows, for the most part, Rick, what he's going to say. And like, I love Rick, but not everybody needs to hear from him every month, And there's so many people that we can elevate and build. And that's actually strengthening the ecosystem, by getting these other people built out and more influential, yeah, like Aaron Orsini, he's a friend and colleague. He did the Autistic Psychedelic Society and a few books on autism
Yeah.
and
Nice.
psychedelics, and he thanks me endlessly for like helping really launch his whole project by PT, right? And like that's really what I want. I want just so many people to get started that there's no way to stop this thing. And like honestly, I want so much diversity in the space that we don't understand this thing. You know, I want us to understand a little bit of the safety, but like, you know, I want people to be doing pretty far out shit.
Yeah, I also really would love if psychedelics culture emulated what actual culture looks like in many ways, like the colors of culture, the vibes of culture, all the differences, all the variances, etc., etc. It's a joke to think that psychedelics culture is a one lane, one track, one minded situation, because it's not. Like everybody can use psychedelics. Many different types of people use psychedelics, and therefore it should emulate real life. And I don't know if it does right now. Not
They
totally.
done fucked around and gave an ex drug dealer a microphone. Goddamn it!
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just there needs to be some diversity in this space, especially just people deserve the opportunity to speak as a headliner at these various events. And it's like, aside from just Paul Stamets, aside from just Robin Carhart Harris, aside from
even though
Rick
I
Doblin,
I do kind of want Robin Carhart Harris at the Oakland conference, even though I do want that to happen.
I
Go
mean,
ahead, I'm
that
sorry
would
to
be
interrupt.
awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's great. I also, you know, if he's listening, I have to ask him a couple questions and need to interview him. So nothing against you,
Yeah,
Robin.
we might need to line
Mr.
that up
Dr.
then.
Carhart. Dr. Carhart Harris.
He's right over there in the Bay, guys. I think it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I might have to make that happen. But to your point, yeah, man. And so I want to take the time that we're on here to thank you, Joe, for making it happen. By my recollection, we've kind of been kicking the idea around for about a year and a half at this point. And you know, I used to work for a woman in Jamaica when I was cultivating over there, the Mushroom Queen. She says everything is in divine order, and I really believe that, especially, you know, in the mushroom world. You don't have to force shit sometimes. Sometimes it's not right now. Sometimes a relationship ain't developed. Sometimes you're not ready, you know, or I'm not ready. But you know, it happened when it needed to happen, and I really appreciate you, you know, rolling the dice and giving us this opportunity to to uplift our voices and to like bring our communities with us on your coattails.
Happy to. It's so
thank
awesome.
you. Yeah, thank you. I mean, you know, psychedelics today also hold such an important role in the community as well. Like, you guys are like one of the leading podcasts, one of the first podcasts, like first to market almost in many ways, and doing big numbers and cool numbers and just good. You guys are doing a major service to the community at large and to people who maybe are just trying to get into psychedelics too, offering them kind of a entry point to start understanding some of these nuances and big topics, and even kind of like theoretical topics too, like how these relate to bigger cultural ideas and science ideas, etc. So it's really great that you're offering us over here in California this platform in this space. So thank you.
Yeah, happy to help, and thanks for those kind words. I'll try not to get too inflated. but but you know, yeah, like bringing in deep philosophical conversations, and like, you know, I felt like I got in some shit on Insta, or what was it, LinkedIn, the other day, because I was talking about how people aren't defining their terms appropriately, right? And we're not having the same conversation. Yeah, you're both saying, you know, mouth noises at each other, but like, do you actually understand each other? Like, no, is the answer. So there's
Right.
terms like spirituality, sacred, what else? Safety. Like, we don't really know. We don't have a good definition of safety. People are like, oh, we need to improve safety. Well, tell me what that shit is. You know?
I mean,
And
that is a very relevant topic right now.
Yes, it is.
Right.
Yes,
And actually, there's
yes, it is.
super big ambiguity on, this is a landmine. I'll step on it for everybody's entertainment, but like, we don't have a great definition that's shared for the word indigenous, right? Like that's actually
I ain't stepping on it.
a little vague, and we need to like, explore that carefully, because there's so much crazy controversy around assorted groups. And like conservation. What does conservation look like? And
yes,
looking at the desert toad and like peyote, like how can we have careful conversations around these things?
Synthetics
and
versus...
also, right, totally. Also, how do conservation and indigeneity butt up against each other? I don't think that we talk about that very much, but it really, I mean, gosh, in my experience reporting on the environment, the relationship between indigeneity and conservation, unfortunately, is a race conversation. And that's why it's often such a hefty, ugly, prickly ass topic that a lot of people don't like talking about. But it is very relevant in the psychedelic space.
Yeah. My friend Biela Bate often says land controlled by indigenous populations has radically more biodiversity and therefore is just a better conservation play than, modern controlled lands, I guess we can call it. Yeah.
Right.
And that's a big thing. We need biodiversity. Like we're facing extinction, everybody. I don't know if y'all knew that. But we should probably be thinking very carefully about how do we do well with the planet, and where can we do lower harm, or no harm, or better, actually regenerate the planet and give indigenous people power back. Like, for instance, indigenous folks on reservations in America can't grow cannabis because it's federal.
Yeah.
That's super fucked up.
Yeah.
What about, like, how could we strategize to help them get access to be able to offer psychedelic services on reservation, and really help, perhaps with their, sovereign angles, perhaps there's a play there, and really empower them more.
There's some very interesting conversations around the indigenous cannabis world right now, and it's fascinating. It's so fascinating, and the reason it's not really covered, at least in the cannabis space, is because it's I think to more mainstream publications it's kind of seen as too niche, and also currently right now, cannabis publications are almost extinct too. So, it goes uncovered. However, there are some reservations that are legalizing cannabis on their reservation, and it's obviously causing problems because it's obviously causing a lot of problems. And but that said, there are reservations in California and in other areas, even including in states where cannabis is not technically legal yet. On the reservations, in some places, they have legalized cannabis, and the reservations can only interact with each other. They can't interact with legal dispensaries because technically their cannabis isn't legal. So there's a whole trade happening between the reservations, which, it's an interesting thing, because it's not really regulated in the same way that it's regulated on the state level in many of these different regions. It's causing some funny things to happen, if you kind of catch my drift. But that's one way for these reservations to start making money. And they've also determined in some studies that the reservations that have legalized cannabis have also had a reduction in alcohol related violence and stuff since legalization has happened. So on the reservation. So that's also huge. And one more thing, going on what you were just talking about biodiversity on indigenous lands, there is a crazy statistic, and it's that indigenous communities on indigenous lands protect 80% of the Earth's biodiversity.
All the more important,
right,
for us to really understand and play into, right?
That's wild. I mean, there aren't many indigenous lands left that are solely for the indigenous, so that's it's a very fascinating statistic.
Yeah. And what can we learn, and how can we mimic that and try our best to improve biodiversity all over the world, right? Like, yes. Monoculture is garbage. And that's what we're fighting in part, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, diversity equals resilience and strength in a lot of ways, and we really need to focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, like that's a really big conversation, an important one, and we need to flesh it out. And like I think, you two will have some really interesting folks on the program to figure out, how we want to develop this conversation, or how did some people want to show up to this conversation, and hopefully in great ways, right? Yeah.
I am looking forward to that. Mary, out of curiosity, what guests that we've kind of tossed out there, confirmed or unconfirmed, are you most excited about us tapping in with, and why?
Oh. Lately, I mean, most of the time, but lately I've been really on a drug war kick. I've been deeply on a drug war kick. Just, thinking about how legalizations in their various forms kind of forget about the drug war, even though they are about the drug war inherently, but there's often little work not little work. I don't know. I just wish there was more work that went into the various legalizations that happen across the country. And therefore, I'm really looking forward, ideally, talking to Freeway Rick, because he talks about a bunch of very interesting topics to me, especially as a Black man who faced the drug war straight on, and the head honchos at the top controlling the drug war like marionette puppets. So I really enjoy talking to him. Also, I want to talk to him more about Gary Webb.
Who is Gary Webb? Just in case motherfuckers don't know.
So Gary Webb was a investigative journalist at I believe in Sacramento. I forget the name
San
of
Jose.
the publication. San Jose Mercury News. The San Jose Mercury News. There we go. And he wrote a bombshell story, basically unveiling the fact that the CIA was facilitating major cocaine dealings in, is it Colombia?
From Nicaragua to South Central.
Right. Yes. From Nicaragua to South Central. And this small time, but also big time investigative reporter wrote this 3-part series and basically lit the world on fire. The story went as viral as it possibly could right when the internet basically came out. And it was one of those things that he couldn't take back. It wasn't just written in print, it wasn't something that could just be thrown away. It was the first time really we saw a journalistic story take off and light the world on fire. And he suffered major consequences as a result from that. And he lost his job. His marriage deteriorated. His wife left him. And everyone stopped believing him because of a disinformation campaign held by every other major news organization, including the LA Times, like especially the LA Times and Washington Post and the New York Times. And they set out to disprove everything that he reported on because they were jealous that they didn't get that story first.
And in cahoots.
You don't think it was like CIA like pressuring the papers to do stuff?
Well, the CIA actually didn't have to do a whole bunch. They would have tried to destroy his life. I mean, they did, but they would have tried to destroy him if every major mainstream publication didn't do it for them. Like they did it for them. The CIA didn't even have to lift a finger to help deteriorate this man and ruin his life. So that all that happened. Gary Webb continued to research and dig because he knew that he was right, and he was just on a mission to clear his name and continue telling this story about how the CIA was facilitating this major drug trade that ultimately ended up in the crack cocaine epidemic in Los Angeles in the 80s. That obviously harmed a lot of people, and our good friend Freeway Rick was right in the center of all of this. So that's how they're related. Anyways, Gary Webb ultimately died with 2 gunshot wounds to the head.
Not just gunshot wounds, 2 shotgun blasts
in the head.
And that's really hard to do.
And they ruled it as fucking suicide. Yeah. They ruled it as suicide. And I'm not okay with that. I'm just not okay with that. Anyways, I could talk ad nauseum about that situation. And I hope to even further with
At age
Free Webb.
49, by the way. So very untimely, quite early death for
Yes.
a
Yes.
major journalist. Did you
Absolutely.
see I hate to bring this guy up, but I will. He's a Colorado resident. I think I identify him with him more with California. But Tom Cruise, American Made. Have you seen that?
I have not seen it.
Fuck yeah, you got to watch that. It was all about the Arkansas link to that whole Iran-Contra cocaine ring.
Oh, wow.
And a fictionalized version, but it's
What's it
not
called?
far off.
American Made?
American Made.
Okay.
American Made. Okay.
Yeah, it like ties
Good
in
to know.
School of the Americas, which is a story people need to understand as well. Like, you know, we got some pretty raw stuff happening here in America
Yeah.
that we've paid for with tax dollars and cocaine dollars. So
Yeah, right.
you know,
Yeah,
we got to
exactly.
really think about it and know our history.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and just one thing to add on this Gary Webb spiel that I'm on right now is that if he was at like the difference between the story that the Washington Post did, Watergate, for instance, and Gary Webb's story, the reason the reporters at the Washington Post didn't get killed for publishing Watergate is because they were with the Washington Post. They had the whole legal team of the Washington Post fully backing them, protecting them, and they had a proper team in place. Gary Webb didn't have that same support. He was left high and dry. He was kicked out to the curb. He didn't have that same legal protection. He didn't have the name of the Washington Post behind him.
So from what I remember, Rick saying that the LA Times ended up hiring a 12-writer team to discredit everything, all the work that Gary Webb was working on. And it was so effective that at the end of the day, the San Jose newspaper ended up trying to like recant the story or something to that nature. Like they ended up turning their back on the story.
Yeah, exactly. Which, you know, I will say as an editor in chief, you know, I don't know. You got to back up your writers. You got to protect them. That's like the role of an editor in chief, in my opinion.
One of the interesting thoughts that I was having, especially as I have been driving across the country, and it popped in my mind when I pulled up in Chicago. It was like for some reason I started thinking about how generations of people made life-changing money, and then I thought about Prohibition in Chicago, and I ended up thinking about specifically the Kennedys. You know, Joe Kennedy, and we all know that Joe Kennedy made their money through Prohibition. And I thought about it in the sense of, as we're talking about legalizing cannabis and legalizing various psychedelics, it's like, as I look at history, at least recent history, the United States government has allowed white criminals in their criminality, particularly when it comes to drugs or substances. They've allowed them to make their money and run their check up. So, for instance, people went to jail with Prohibition, but when you look at the way that the people who were really big players landed, they ended up keeping all of their money and giving licenses to continue. When I looked at cannabis, the government has allowed these guys in the mountains of Colorado and the mountains of Appalachia and the mountains of California to run their money up, get their money, get licenses, and continue. And I was thinking about the impact that would have had if, like it or not, like crack was an opportunity, cocaine was an opportunity for folks in the Black community in that era to run up large amounts of money. Rick was talking about he was selling 100 kgs of not cocaine but crack a day. 100 kilos of crack a day is a shit ton of crack. And just wondering about what the world would look like if that generation of drug dealers had their criminality forgiven and they were invited into society and allowed to keep those funds and like transition over into maybe not legal crack dealers, even though I'd much rather legal crack than prohibited, just because you don't know what the fuck is in it and we're perpetuating the drug war. But let's just say that they were allowed to transition in if they decided that they didn't want to, they could keep their money. If they decided they weren't going to sell crack anymore, like what sort of infrastructure will we be looking at in South Central LA right now? What would Oakland, because he got the formula from Oakland. So it's like, what will we be looking at in terms of resources in the Black community, and investments in the Black community, if across the country we were allowed, the people who ran up huge amounts of money, if we didn't just throw them in jail and throw their lives away and let the government steal their fucking money through asset forfeitures and things like that. If that money stayed in the community to enrich and to invest people, like, where will we be? How many doctors will we have because they were sent to college? You know, how many business people will we have because they had the seed money to start their business? And I'd like to just revisit or have a part 2 of the conversation with Rick about something like that.
Well, wouldn't that be an equitable world? Wouldn't that be a free world then? If they were able to do that, which I guess proves that we don't live in one.
It's yeah, let's host the legalized crack conference. So, do you ever see that? Like, Eric Andre runs around like a lunatic sometimes. He, like, you know, throws lines like that out, like, "Oh yeah, I'm just heading into my legalized heroin convention," and it's like, you know, like, there's a joke there, but there's also some interesting truth, right? Like, there are these really major drug policy conferences happening, and they can save tons of lives, right? Like, and not to mention, like, the capital, right? Like, an incarceration from the drug war offense hurts a family for generations. Right? Like, I think the number was like 5 generations, which is fucked.
It makes me upset because the United States greatly depends on money from privately owned prisons, and, you know, these prisons funding the government and funding people in the government and funding individual people. And that's upsetting. That kind of makes it very difficult for people at the top to dismantle this drug war.
There's a negative incentive. If I had my purpose, I think about this shit all the time. It's like, yo, fuck asset forfeiture. Fuck it. Like, no, you're legalized. I was studying pirates and I was studying governments. And all this is government sanctioned piracy. That's what it is. When the Brits were trying to fight the Spanish, or the English were fighting the Spanish, both sides would legalize robbery from the other side, you know, to weaken them. And so the government has legalized robbery from, you know, the peasants, quite frankly, or like the underbelly. They've legalized it and given the police, and they've outright abused it. Fuck asset forfeiture. Fuck confidential informants. The confidential informant should be illegal. If you're going to inform, you should have to stand on that and testify in public and put your name on it. And lastly, fuck the plea deal. If the government can prove you did it, let them prove you did it and then do the time. And then they have to create the infrastructure to house all of these people, because there's probably exponentially more people walking around out here on papers than there are if they could house. And if you had to house those people, I guarantee you these same fiscal conservatives would not fucking stand for it. You know, if you had to house and feed all these people who we have under government supervision, fuck all that shit is what I believe. And I think that if you force the government to take every single case to trial, the system will fucking crumble.
And fuck for-profit prisons.
Fuck that too.
Yeah, fuck for-profit prisons. Fuck it.
You guys are saying a lot of really good things. This is good. So, yeah, I think the last time I checked a stat on civil asset forfeiture, that number was orders of magnitude higher than, this is what I recall, regular theft in America. Like, American civil asset forfeiture way outpaced normal theft.
Of course.
So, yeah.
Because you can shoot like, back at a thief. If you kick my door in the wrong way and you're just a regular old person, I can shoot you. Whereas if the government fucking decides that they want to pull you over, okay, and those numbers that you're talking about, Joe, are only the numbers that they claim. Report. Do you know how many of my mans and them got fucking cash just straight ripped? Just straight ripped. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. It's like, yo, this is coming with us. If you want to say something about it, go put a complaint in at the station. Have you heard about them boys in Baltimore? That ring of guys in Baltimore that was running around terrorizing Baltimore, robbing fucking drug dealers? These are police.
Yeah, I think there's a show about that.
There's a movie about it. And actually, yeah. Long story, I used to live in DC. My ex-girlfriend's best friend was dating this dude, and she's a lawyer. I remember that there was this police, and I would see him on Instagram, She was, just coming out of grad school, she just got barred. She's just trying to get a little consulting work. And this police officer asked her to put together his LLC. And I'm looking at the dude on Instagram and I'm telling her, dog, and this was before the shit came out. I'm telling her, yo, it's some about him ain't right. Police should not have this much motherfucking money. And then turns out he's part of this band of goons that is just robbing people. He gave his girlfriend a purse that he took from a dope boy. So, nah, man, fuck it. Civil forfeiture, fuck it.
Yeah.
That is, yeah. Like these are conversations that people need to understand, and people in the psychedelic space don't really understand them, right? It's tragic because we're allies. We should be allies in this. Not saying like, oh, yo, like I don't actually care about those people because those drugs are dirty and they make people dirty.
Yeah.
But these drugs over here make you clean and more godly.
Yeah.
It's like, no, guys, we're all fighting the same war. Let's unify a bit and work together towards mutually beneficial goals that help the whole world, right? Like Dr. Carl Hart at Horizons a couple years ago actually I think blew people's minds, and people were probably crying during this talk. And it was so important because he was actually showing and discussing how our exported war on drugs now leads to straight up executions in the Philippines.
Yes.
And people should go watch that talk on YouTube, Carl Hart, Horizons. And he also straight up shows like, hey, look, Black community has a psychedelic that's pretty common, PCP. And you know what happens? Like there's so much propaganda and hate here that the police just straight up shoot people in the back, right? For being on a psychedelic and walking away from the police. And in no other situation would they get away with that shit. And I think those cops got away with it because people are so afraid of PCP. And, I haven't tried it yet. I don't know if I should be afraid of it, but I it's a modified ketamine that's a little more exciting.
Yep.
So,
right.
Yeah.
I talked to him. Go for it.
I was going to say just a quick little factoid about PCP. PCP was originally created as an anesthetic to be used in medicine, but they realized that it was too strong to be using it. And people were kind of having these, not necessarily adverse reaction, but like hefty trips. And it kind of took a long time for them to come back down. So then they invented ketamine. And ketamine took the place, basically, of PCP in medicine. And people had a better reaction to ketamine, even though it kind of made them still kind of trippy, but didn't last nearly as long, much shorter, but had the same effect of being able to be used in medicine as an anesthetic. So there you go.
I love that.
So before I started talking to Carl Hart, I would consider myself an exceptionalist or elitist, but Carl Hart has been thinking about these things for a very long time, and if you've been following his work has evolved, and so if he can evolve like his position, it's okay for us to evolve our positions as well. And like you said, both Mary and Joe, PCP is damn near chemically structured the same exact way as ketamine. What Dr. Hart says is that they used PCP and they sensationalize PCP and says that Black people are taking it and they can, if you shoot them with regular guns, that they won't be stopped by regular bullets, which is fucking nonsense. But they won't be stopped with regular bullets, which enabled police departments to spend more money now on new weapons and gave them green lights. If you think about it, let's think about the way that we've seen shit happen in the streets. They gave them green lights and permission to kill these people without thinking twice. We don't fuck harm reduction, call the fuck police. These are demons now. They are they turned them into the Hulk. They turned them into the Brute, and it's green lighted police violence. And if you look at it, like I've actually texted Dr. Hart, like because the police shit, sometimes I get tired of seeing the murders on the news. I get tired of seeing it and it hurts my feelings and I get emotional about it. I remember I think the dude Tyree Nichols, I called Dr. Hart and I'm like, Dr. Hart, man, like I finally see what the fuck you talking about, man. They're saying that it was fentanyl in this dude's blood and they're using that as a reason to kill him. And he had his piece, but like it's a play that the police run, particularly with Black folks and Indigenous folks. But it's a play that they run. Okay, we know that in society we've been able to demonize these things. Imagine if there was no stigma around PCP, or imagine if there was no stigma around, let's say fentanyl. Dr. Hart he says, there are acceptable medical applications for fentanyl, where it's not deadly and it's used well, in clinical situations.
I've had it a bunch of times.
Me too.
It's great.
Too. It is great. I had it when I had my eye surgery a couple years ago, and I don't know, I was like totally functioning after my eye surgery with one eye, but on fentanyl as well. And I remember thinking like, wow, this is great.
And so, yes, we should make sure that fentanyl isn't in our substances or in what we're consuming, and we're unwittingly unknown. But how do we change that? And then we turn the corner into, that's why the thing should just be legal. Like, fuck, okay, it might not be for you. I don't like drinking liquor. I like drinking beer, and so I can say, maybe I don't do this over here. But for the person that wants to do that, they know that they can have good access to what they're going to do anyway. They can have good access
what they're going
to
to do anyway.
It's going to be clean, and they're not going to become, and this might be cold and callous, but through legalizing these sorts of things, actually you save money in the long run, because it costs us, if the ambulance has to go out and revive a fucking person, like, they're not paying for it. The taxpayer pays that shit, which means you can't pay a teacher, you can't pay a counselor or something like that.
Well, this is how we can actually have a bipartisan conversation here in psychedelics and drug harm reduction, right? It's not just like, yeah, we need to spend more money so that we can end the drug war. It's like, no, we can actually reduce spend radically and do way better. We have to just take it really seriously. And that's actually can hit a lot of people on the right really, really well. I was at this libertarian conference in Denver somewhat recently. It was like a libertarian psychedelic conference, which is wild.
Wild.
I got a kick out of it. And people were really perplexed on like, how do we actually solve this? I'm like, well, guys, like, because they want zero taxes, right? I'm like, well, this is a transitional play. This is like, how do we radically reduce costs? How do we actually get these people back to their lives so we have whole families again, whole systems again? And then, we stop willfully harming people. Like the amount of trauma that somebody can collect while incarcerated is pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
And
yes,
like, what if we, the maps, like, the whole Richter, what is it, net zero trauma thing, like, cool, but also like, how about we stop putting people in jail and like stop creating all that new trauma and actually like shooting at people and like, how do we make these populations more legitimate, such that there's not the same outsider mentality that's happening? And like, oh, cool, we can all just be part of this civil society again when we're actually taking care of each other and trying to get people to be same page members of society, right? So I think, yeah, like these are big topics that we can really flesh out.
I used to believe that you could have both sides of the. I remember I was young and idealistic and probably stupid and thought, okay, well, if there's a conversation to be had with Republican leaning people on gun rights. I'm like, all right, well, if Chicago, if there's a whole bunch of, random acts of violence in Chicago, then maybe the NRA could go in there and like teach people how to shoot. So at least they wouldn't be random people getting shot. Like, I feel like there was a spot and kind of
shoot the guy you actually want to shoot.
I mean,
kind of thing.
It's better than, better hitting the baby. But to connect it with what you're talking about, Joe, I think that there's a pro-life conversation to be had here. If you're pro-life, like in the Bible, it don't say nothing about drugs being bad. It doesn't say that, so there's a pro-life conversation. And if that's not your hill, then yeah, like you said, there is an economic conversation to be had about saving costs. You save cost on police, you save cost on ambulance, you save cost just publicly, period, if we were to set up ways that people could receive these things as opposed to criminalizing these things and throwing people in fucking jail. And the trauma of it too, like you said, like um jail doesn't just go, like, you don't just go to jail and go and get out. It's there's if you can't afford to bail out, you got to sit there, which means the state has to feed you. All right, the state has to pay for your lawyer who is over fucking work, and the likelihood of you coming out on paperwork violating, it's just that's crazy. I remember going through a legal situation with my one person doesn't go through it. If the individual goes through it, their whole family goes through it. I remember going through a legal situation myself and trying to fight to get my bail, and my grandfather is literally dying. So my mom has to figure out, well, does she want to support her son, or does she want to go spend her time with her father who's fucking dying? You know, and so it does traumatize the whole family. So yeah, I'm rolling with y'all on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the drug war, I'm really excited for you two to keep digging in.
Yeah, the drug war.
We're gonna dig the fuck in.
Interestingly, I have been reading some stories that recently came out about Oregon's law that has decriminalized all drugs, small amounts of all drugs. And a lot of people are very critical about it because I think we're about a year and a half in or a year in or something. And people are like, there are more homeless people, more homeless drug addicts on the streets, blah, blah, that whole rhetoric. And, what the pictures, the photos, everything, the people that they interviewed really are backing this up. However, the current system doesn't have the proper support for helping people get off of drugs, or if they want to get off of drugs, what's the protocol? Where do these people go? There aren't enough so there isn't enough infrastructure to help these people and to allow that law to fully do what it's capable of. Like it's like almost an incomplete law because of the lack of mental health services, the lack of support, there's nothing to help people get off the streets. There's nothing to provide people the services that they need. And so now there's a bunch of criticism coming out about that when really the issue is a lack of mental health services and a lack of support around this law.
And choose not to fund it.
If I had to sleep on the fucking street, man, I refuse to believe that the predicate action to people being homeless or unhoused is that they're on drugs. Like, I think that's another demonization. I think that
100%.
I think that if I were unhoused and I had to deal with the stress of just street life, then yeah, I might want to get fucked up too.
Of course.
So I would say to those people, yo, why don't we try? Like, okay, I feel you. You don't like people being unhoused. I don't like people being unhoused. Why don't we do something to house them? And let's see what that does to the drug problem.
All right, we just recovered from a short technical hiccup there. Sorry, buddy. But we were chatting about like the recent decriminalization initiatives that got laid out in Oregon, and I was recording a podcast with some friends on Saturday, just a few days ago, early August here, and they were asking me, like, in their lived experience, Portland has gotten really rough. But to your point, Reggie, like they passed this bill, or I forget if it was you or Mary that said this, but yeah, they passed this whole decriminal bill, but they did not lay out the infrastructure. Like, for example, how Portugal did. Portugal did a really great job in funding the program, and their incarceration rates are really low. Their overdose rates are really low. And what decrim does is allows people to operate a little more safely. They can take safety precautions that you can't necessarily, under-resourced folks can't necessarily take in a hardcore, scary prohibitionist frame, right? But I don't know. Any other comments on this Oregon situation?
Yeah, I would say that not only did they not create kind of the proper infrastructure to help people either get off the streets, to get off of drugs, for mental health services, et cetera, but a lot of the times I find that these either legalization measures or decrim measures, they are kind of they sort of lack foresight. They don't even know that they need the infrastructure. They don't even know that they need the proper support around that specific law in order for it to reach its fullest potential, its most positive potential. And I think that that's something that has happened with that specific decrim law.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah. It's a tough one.
It is.
Also, it's getting fucked up everywhere. Like, it's getting fucked up everywhere. In places where drugs are fully fucking prohibited, it's getting fucked up. And it's getting fucked up like in places where drugs are a little bit more loose. Like in Chicago, they have tight ass drug laws. And like homelessness is popping in Chicago, violence is popping in Chicago. In Oakland, the only thing that's legal in Oakland is fucking mushrooms and weed. And in Oakland, it's it's crazy. Like for me, I, I I just bring it back to the rhetoric behind demonizing drugs and demonizing drug users, when in fact, like, we've sat here for the last 18 months and we've watched the government tighten up fucking interest rates, which means money's more expensive, the cost of things is going up, and there's going to be less jobs. What the fuck are we overlooking the fact that the government is actively cutting down on jobs and making money and resources more expensive?
I think we're blaming people who are on drugs or homelessness or whatever when there's actually a housing crisis that's impacting everybody. Rent is impossible.
The rent is impossible. I'm talking about, I went out and bought me and Karsten dinner last night. I bought chicken wings and oxtail for us both, and it was $100.
Exactly,
$100. You know, so I think that it's a scapegoat to blame those undesirables and to blame that. But the fact of the matter is also, like, rich people are using drugs too.
Absolutely.
Rich people use drugs all day, all night. Like, they're using them to have access. In San Francisco, and I know he's talking about Oregon, but in San Francisco, did y'all hear about the man from PayPal that got killed?
Yes.
They tried to say, the owner of the dude who started PayPal, or Cash App, I'm sorry, the dude who started Cash App got killed.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, they tried to blame it on the random San Francisco drug dealers and or drug users and junkies in San Francisco. Man, come to find out that the dude was having some malfeasance with somebody's wife or somebody's sister. It was some inside rich people shit. It had nothing to do with drug dealers, but they wanted to make it seem like drug dealers and drug users was the reason this guy he was killed. And it wasn't. It had nothing to do with a random fucking dope fiend. It was rich people shit.
Mm-hmm. So I just remembered something that we didn't get to cover, you two. So who are you? So Mary, like, can you give us like a little bit of a roundup of like what's your background in writing?
Yes. So I have been a journalist covering all kinds of different things, but specifically drugs, starting with cannabis and evolving into psychedelics since 2016. And I got my start over at OC Weekly. It was the alt weekly in Orange County, which is where I'm from. And at the time, that was, I didn't want to move back to Orange County. I was like really apprehensive about it because I hate that place in so many ways. But once I got there and I realized that I was going to be reporting on Orange County, I realized that it was a wonderful place to hate. It was the most fun because there are so many things to talk about there that actually impact the entire country all the time. And I had a lot of fun getting in there, getting into the drug culture there, getting into environmental issues there, and reporting on culture. And that has basically, my experience there has basically influenced all of the reporting that I do now. And it was totally fundamental in my reporting today and podcasting and everything. All of that was stuff that I kind of learned on, I learned it there. And now I'm using all these skills now And I had really wonderful mentors who were old school investigative reporters who started reporting and researching and investigating people and things and topics and politicians and everything before the internet was a thing. So they had to do it the old school way. And they're the ones who kind of taught me how to report. And they taught me initially, like right up top, sort of how to be an investigative reporter. I didn't really know that at the time, but it's been something that I've been reflecting on. And I realize now, like, oh, they were teaching me that from the get-go, which is, again, invaluable skills and stuff that I hope to continue to apply to my work life and my reporting life and my podcast and everything as I move forward. And since then I have been the editor at High Times. I was the news editor at High Times for a while. I was the managing editor at Mary Jane, which was Snoop Dogg's cannabis culture publication. And from there, I've been freelance. I write for Double Blind. I've written for Forbes. I've written for Insider. I've written for Billboard. I work with KCRW, which is the local NPR arm in Los Angeles. And yeah, I'm just bringing the news about cannabis and psychedelics culture and environmental issues, and often where these worlds intersect. And they intersect with so many different things that I end up writing about all kinds of stuff. And pretty much as long as it fascinates me, I will write about it. So yeah.
It's amazing. Thank you. And Reggie, how about yourself?
So my background is interesting. The way I got into the psychedelic space was in high school. I started selling mushrooms. I ate mushrooms for the first time. The mushrooms told me to sell the fucking mushrooms. I was blessed enough to have probably the best connection that in the world that one could have, and I made a lot of money doing so in high school. Went to Europe, dropped out of college, went to Europe, worked on the largest magic mushroom farm in the world for, at that time, the biggest mushroom church in the world. And when the laws in Europe changed and mushrooms became prohibited because of fucking propaganda, I came back to the States, sold a little bit of weed, waited tables, did politics, did anything that I had to do to like keep food on the table and survive, with no college degree and pretty young, no skill other than really selling mushrooms and weed. Fast forward to 2019, something in my spirit said, take a trip around the world. And while I'm on this trip, something in my spirit said, just gather a bunch of genetics. And so since I was familiar, I had connections in Amsterdam, have connections in Switzerland. By the way, we was talking about legal heroin jokingly. In Switzerland, they have legal heroin. And so at that time they had legalized weed. It's a Swiss grass for Swiss people. But I fast forward, I went around the world, bought a bunch of genetics, not even knowing that the law was about to change. But at that time, Europe had the best mushroom genetics, bought them. I saw Denver decriminalized. And then I saw shortly thereafter in June, Oakland decriminalized. And I ended up just going really hard in cultivation. Converted my spare bedroom to a little grow facility, and then end up scaling all the way up into a warehouse. From there, ended up working with the next and the current largest mushroom church in the world. Worked every capacity for the mushroom church, from growing their fruit at one point. I worked the counter there. Spun off to start working with companies growing mushrooms down in Jamaica. I've worked with several companies, some of the companies associated with Amanda Fielding, and the companies end up folding. From there, started Oakland Hyphae, which is a mushroom / psychedelics, I call cultural organization. I believe that we help hold and curate psychedelic culture for the people. We help advocate for the people. And through Oakland Hyphae, we spun off Hyphae Labs, which was the first psilocybin mushroom potency testing company in the world. That was us. Before, even if you look at Europe, they were using like pluses and just anecdotes. We put science to measuring potency, and the conversation is still being had, but we were the first to establish that, which then spun into us holding the first psilocybin cup, which we rebranded into the Hyphae cup. So when you see these cups coming around, you see these testing companies coming around, I call them all my sons, because they're all my sons. They didn't exist before I birthed them. A man can give birth. I gave birth to these sons. And from there, we just decided to have fun. So we started having the Oakland Psychedelic Conference here in Oakland. We got it coming up September 16th and 17th. So if you're interested, go to oakland.hyphae, and in the link tree, we have tickets to the Oakland Psychedelic Conference. We have the LA Psychedelic Conference that's pretty hot. We had Hamilton Morris and Freeway Rick Ross as our headliners last time. And then the National Psychedelic Conference in DC we've just developed a reputation for being very credible sources in the community, very focused on the people, very focused on legacy. And when we say legacy, we mean people who have been putting their necks on the line to bring you this medicine, to bring you these rituals. Me and my family have spent a bunch of lawyer money trying to keep people out of jail. And I'll be honest, I do feel like I am entitled and deserve a seat at the table. I've worked for it. I've risked it all, and I'm here. And I'm honored to be here with both y'all two, turning the corner. So we're not taking no more risk anymore, but we are still advocating for the people who we are, who we represent. And I couldn't be more fucking honored to be here, especially with my I don't even want to call you, I don't know what to call you, Mary, but I know when it's go time. When I say, Mary, I want to do this shit, Mary's like, hell yeah, let's do that shit. And so I'm honored to be here with both of y'all. I really honestly think that what we doing here is gonna be game changing. I know it's podcast out here, but it is not podcast that brings the breadth of experiences and the network that we bring. I think that I stand on my laurels of being unbought and unbossed. Nobody owns us. We're not dancing for any sponsors. We hope that people like what we do, and we know that our crowd fucks with us. And if the people fuck with us, really don't nobody else gotta fuck with us, man. And so that's us. I don't consider myself a founder. I don't consider myself a CEO. I don't consider myself a president. My title, if you want to call me anything, call me HNIC. And if you don't know what that means, go look it up, and I stand on that. All right. And that's it. That's who I am.
That's awesome. I love that. And yeah, it's just like, you can tell we're going to have a really good series here, everybody. Like, these guys are going to dig into some really great stuff. And your investigative background, Mary, is going to help a ton. Like, there's going to be stories that I think we can really uncover and figure out, right? Like,
yes, that's the goal. That's the goal for sure.
Yeah. So I love that and really appreciate that. Yeah. Like, I often see, journalists out there, and, they assume they're doing the right thing, right? But the way they put their piece together could be extraordinarily pro-drug war, and they might not know it. And it sounds like you're going to, really have an eye on that.
Yeah. Thank you. I think a lot of journalists do want to do well. And I think that it takes a lot of experience in reporting, specifically in this space, to not put out other propaganda. It's very difficult because of just kind of the way a lot of the talking points are currently in these various legalization movements, like with psychedelics and cannabis. Like, it's hard sometimes, if you're not careful and aware, to not sort of play that game, that narrative game, that propaganda game, too, whether that's like pro or against. It's difficult. There's a line to be walked very strategically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And and I work with journalists. I consider myself a propagandist, though. So I'm like, I have a very specific agenda, and I'm working towards it every day. And that means I can work with journalists, though, right? And it's going to be really cool. And I'm excited about working with both of you, because we just need more journalism in the space. We need more stories told in the space. And we need to be able to talk to folks that might be the boogeyman, right?
Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely.
I can't believe you had, XYZ on the show because he said he liked this one Joe Rogan episode, so he should be canceled. And it's like, that's kind of the level of discourse that's happening, and we need to really go far beyond that. Yeah.
There's very few people who has been able to put the same. Not only like do we have access to damn near everybody, but people are willing to sit next to each other and talk to each other that don't even fuck with each other, that would never, ever, ever, ever do it. And that's what you get with us.
Yeah, you did it with me. So
yeah, I did. You were still shady though. I went back and looked at that video. I'm like, yo, my man was being kind of shady a little bit to Carlos. I think he deserved it, but
yeah, for sure. And I stand by everything I did. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like you can only treat people badly for so long, and tell half truths for so long. Anyway. So, all right, we got Hyphae Leaks podcast is coming out real soon. Everybody, like, subscribe. It's going to be everywhere the podcasts are. We're going to be really trying to blow this thing up and making a real go at it. And, I'm just excited to have 2 more amazing podcasters in the space. So thank y'all for working with me and trusting me. Anything else y'all want to shout out?
Mary.
I'm thinking. All
right, I'm gonna go while you think.
How about your conference?
Yeah. So shout out to both Hyphae Leaks podcast, but also Hyphae Leaks has a Substack. Mary and I have worked a lot on it. We have, like I said, we have some very interesting pieces. We have a piece that we're about to put out with the legal changes in Minnesota. That piece is done. We're gonna do a maps recap. That piece is done. Also, folks, I know y'all been hearing about everything that's happening with the Ancestor Project. We got a piece that's done that we're gonna put out straight from the organizers' mouths. These are our homies, so ain't gonna be no he say she say. We got that piece coming. So tap into the Hyphae Leaks Substack. It's you can choose to break us off a little bit, but it's a free access and great journalism, shit that you're not gonna get anywhere else. You can follow me on at Instagram on Hyphae Oakland.hyphae, Oakland.hyphae, or at Instagram on Hyphae Labs. And finally, in September, we are going to have our 3rd annual Oakland Psychedelic Conference. I'm very excited. We're leading up with Mushroom Week, and it's going to pop off. We might be having a launch party for this. But we're definitely going to do a screening for The Table of Our Own. It's a documentary about Black psychedelic professionals. We got Grand Lake Theater, so you want to tap into that. But then we are going to take over downtown Oakland, goddammit. We're taking over downtown Oakland. It's damn near all planned by women. Some of the best, brightest women that I know. We're taking over for the Oakland Psychedelic Conference, so tap in. Go to the link in my bio. You can get tickets. That shit is not to be missed. Listen, the shit about my motherfucking conferences has nothing to do with the headliners. It has everything to do with the people who are there. I've created careers. People have created careers off networks. People have made quite literally, millions and millions and millions of dollars just from getting connected at the Oakland Psychedelic Conference. So if you want to figure out a way to tap in, I don't care if you are a newbie and just want to get in, or if you're a veteran. It's something for everybody, so tap in. We want to see you there. I'm hoping to have Mary there. I'm going to push to get Joe there, but goddamn it, that's how you can fuck with me.
Well, you can follow me on Instagram. My handle is Mary Prankster. Mary spelled with 3 Y's, so MARYYY Prankster. And yeah, I've got stories coming out. for KCRW in the next few weeks on cannabis robberies. It's been a whole thing. I've been in touch with LAPD. It has been a pain in the ass, honestly, working with them. but they've given me some interesting tidbits in regards to this cannabis robbery situation happening in Los Angeles. And it's kind of the story is about how this is happening here in LA, but it's actually happening all over the state, and it's destroying businesses horribly. So that's what the story is about, and also how maybe how the cops aren't doing all that they can, So yeah,
really,
and also
really.
Got some other stories for KCRW coming out too. I'm really just kind of pushing on this podcast initiative and public radio initiative, so you'll be hearing a lot more of me and also reading more of my work, but you'll be hearing more opportunities from me about how to listen to my work with me, etc. So yeah, hit me up, Mary Prankster, on Instagram and Twitter and social media.
Outstanding. Mary, Reggie, thank you so much. I'm really very excited to see what kind of episodes y'all come up with. I know you got some great ones in the can already. And yeah, let's do it. I can't wait.
Let's
Thank
do
you
it.
both.
Fucking go.
Woo!
Yeah. All right. Hyphae Leaks podcast. It's on. All right. See you next time, everybody.